All right. Today is a special day because we have Lance Baker with us. He represents his entire family, so Lance and Ruth are the three boys. They are missionaries in Thailand, and because of the presentation that he's going to make, we're going to leave all of the youth and the children in here except for the youngest one. So if you're in the back classroom, you're welcome to go back there and be a part of that time. So if you want to go out at this time, kids, young kids, to the back classroom, go ahead.
Hey, there's your sister. There they go. Go with them. Go.
And for the rest of us, I want to invite Lance up here. We're excited to have you here, and the floor is yours. Please give a warm welcome to Lance.
Well, good morning. Good morning. It is wonderful to be here. Let me just, yep, it works. All right. Don't be too sure. All right. So yeah, by way of introduction, my name is Lance Baker. I apologize. My wife kept my kids home this morning. They've been really worn out, and we've been pushing them a little hard. So just me this morning, but I'm really happy to be here, and hope I can bless everybody with what I'm going to share. And I'm going to give you, I guess, kind of an overview of what we've done in the past, but try to focus more on what we are currently doing. So let me open in prayer, and we'll go from there. Father God, Lord, it is so good to be with fellow believers. It is so good to be in your presence. I thank you that I have a chance to maybe connect folks here with what it is that you're doing in Asia. And we thank you that you are so active and so involved, and just that you're doing so much work in the hearts of so many people all across the earth simultaneously. And you are an awe-inspiring and amazing God, and we just thank you that you've chosen us. Thank you that we have the privilege of worshiping you and of knowing you, and of spending eternity with you. And so we thank you for those things, and we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Well, so a very brief overview. In 2014, I ended my career. I worked at Erie Insurance up in Erie.
Okay.
And we went to a one-year seminary and missionary training school in North Carolina. And then as that ended, after a few months passed, we did go to China. So we were in China about 3.5 years total. And then it became apparent that those doors were kind of closing. Almost every missionary we know, and almost every missionary we've heard of, has been removed from China. They even started removing just any expat, any foreigner who was living in their country. A lot of businessmen had to leave, quite a few people. So it was during that removal process that God also had our attention shifting a little bit to Thailand. And we were looking at all the ministries that were going on there. And God was pulling our hearts that direction even before everyone was being forced out. So we took that as just one more confirmation. There's a lot of factors, health factors for our second-born. He just wasn't handling China well. And all the pollution and bad water. There's a lot of times bad food. It just was too much for him. Whereas Thailand has just been wonderful for him. So it's been a very good transition. So I'd like to go ahead and start out, actually, though, by sharing some verses. I'd like to start, if you want to turn with me to Acts 17, in verse 22 through 31. I have the NASB. So Acts 17, 22 through 31. And I just want to share briefly from this passage. and then I'm going to show photos from China and Thailand, actually. And then I want to, we're going to come back to this passage too while I'm speaking. So, let's start. So Paul stood in the midst of the this is a difficult word, Areopagus, and he said, "Men of Athens, I observe that you are very religious in all respects. For while I was passing through and examining the objects of your worship, I also found an altar with this inscription, 'To an unknown God.' Therefore what you worship in ignorance, this I proclaim to you. The God who made the world and all things in it, since he is Lord of heaven and earth, does not dwell in temples made with hands, nor is he served by human hands as though he needed anything. Since he himself gives to all people life and breath and all things, and he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined their appointed times and boundaries of their habitation, that they would seek God if perhaps they might grope for him and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move and exist, as even some of your own poets have said, for we also are his children. Being then the children of God, we ought not to think that the divine nature is like gold or silver or stone, an image formed by the art and thought of man. Therefore, having overlooked the times of ignorance, God is now declaring to men that all people everywhere should repent, because he has fixed a day in which he will judge the world in righteousness, through a man whom he has appointed, having furnished proof to all men by raising him from the dead." So let's pause right there. I apologize, my throat's a little dry as well. So what I guess I wanted to look at in these verses is sort of the model or the mindset that Paul has as he approached these folks. So there's some points here that kind of carry right over into mission work. But they also carry over just right into the way that, as Christians, that we're called to live our daily lives. So one of the things that kind of stood out to me was that as he kind of entered this situation, and you can read before and after, there's more, I guess, to the story, but as he entered into this city, into this people group, if you will, he looked first, so before he just maybe entered the marketplace or where he's going to go into and just started preaching, he first took stock of what was going on around him. He looked at their current status or their, what they were doing currently to worship. And he saw their idols and he saw what they were doing, but he took note of the fact, he observed that they had one idol set up to what they called an unknown God. So he's like, all right, well that's interesting. These folks recognize that there probably is, or maybe definitely is, more to what they're worshiping than they know. They already have that. So that's, from his perspective, Paul's perspective, that's an in, right? That's a way that he can say, well, if you already recognize that there's more than what you know to God or gods or whatever it is that you believe, let me fill you in. Let me tell you something that I know about God, something that God has told me. And he started, right in with basically the God who made the world and all things in it, since he is Lord of heaven, and he kind of goes from there, but he starts right at the beginning. And he says, the unknown God that you don't know is in fact the creator of all things. So that's a pretty big claim, right? But it's the starting point of the Bible itself, right? I mean, that is often the best place to start. And he pretty quickly transitions. He said he does not dwell in temples made with hands. So he pretty quickly brings us around to say, he starts to hint at that all of their idols they have set up, this is not really where God dwells. You're not going to find him in something that you crafted with your own hands. That's not the method by which we find God. God crafted us, but we don't craft him, right? And so that's kind of the avenue that he takes here. And he launches basically into a sermon. And he tells them that God is not far from each of them. We exist in him, and we're actually his children. And he brings us around, and again, so he doesn't pull any punches either. He says, therefore, having overlooked the times of ignorance, God is now declaring to all men that all people everywhere should repent. because he's fixed a day in which he's going to judge. There's going to be a judgment. So Paul also, while he starts with, you know, I don't want to say softly, but he doesn't come in, you know, yelling at them or anything or trying to scare them. He starts where they're at, but he does come around pretty quickly. You also do have to include the entire gospel message, and part of that is, you know, that God had certain expectations of his creation, and that we did not fulfill those. Right from the beginning, basically, Adam and Eve, they fell. We have followed suit, and that there is a judgment, but there's also, in the same sentence he says, through a man whom he has appointed, having furnished proof to all men by raising him from the dead, and he's speaking of Jesus, right? There's also a solution, and God has provided that solution. Anyway, so I think as we, you know, maybe we're going overseas to share the gospel, maybe it's your neighbor, but this is a good model. It's something to follow. It's a you know, an example that has been written down for us, and it's something to, I think, model our behavior after. Bearing in mind, if you read the next few verses, the results, right, of our obedience in sharing this message, the result's often going to look like this. It says in verse 34, but some men joined him and believed. Right? The verse before that says, some began to sneer at him in verse 32 there. So you're always going to have that reaction, and we should be prepared for that. Right? We're going to be sneered at, but we're also going to be accepted, hopefully. We get to see a little bit of both. And that's okay too, because the salvation that we're preaching, it's God's salvation, it's not ours. And so one thing you can say is, as we're doing mission work, it's actually God's mission. It's not my mission, it's not anybody's mission, it's God's mission. He's invited me to join him. And I don't know what the results of that are going to be. And I don't even really get a vote. I get to be obedient. I get to share the message with the people that I come across, and we can have plans and we can, you know, have strategy. But in the end, it really is his mission. And so, you know, but we get to see some amazing things that he does. But we also sometimes are not accepted, and that shouldn't be real shocking either. So. We're going to loop back around. I want to come back to these verses in a little bit. But right now, I would also like to show you some photos of what we've been up to. So, to continue my story, so after we did the missionary training, we went overseas and we landed in China. So this is the city of Kunming, China, in the Yunnan province. It's near the south, southern part of China, and it's 6.4 million people. So it's monstrous city. My wife's from Edinburgh, and I grew up south of Pittsburgh. Neither of us can see any neighbors. Both of our families happen to own some land and use sea trees. So this was a really dramatic transition for us. It took quite a bit of getting used to. I don't know that I ever actually got used to it. But that's where we were at. This was our, what do you call it? Housing complex, I guess you could say. So it used to be a pointer. Oh, doesn't work on television. Anyway, these buildings are 17 levels, and we were on the 17th level, so we had access to the roof, so we could go up there and could see some sunlight. Not because if you're on the lower levels, you look across, you just see another one of these, just window, and that's all we ever see. So we're really blessed to be up on top. And this is a picture of our home church. So we met in an underground church. There's a network of underground churches. So we kind of led one, I don't know if you call it a branch or whatever, but we led one homeschool, home church rather, sorry. And this fella in the striped shirts, he's actually an American citizen, he's Asian, but he and I were the only two mission families in the group. Everybody else was nationals that were just from right there in the area or that had moved there. A lot of them ended up, you can kind of tell from the photo, being in like the 20 to 30 year age range. And so they would come and work in the city for a year maybe, and then they get a different job and live somewhere else, which is very typical to Chinese culture. But we met in a different location for security. Each week we'd bounce around and we would, send out hopefully secure encrypted message to, you know, arrange where we're going to meet. We took some security precautions in that way. The first city we were at another city briefly. They were very intense because they were translating the Bible, which is very much against the law. It's also illegal to meet with nationals. You can only meet with foreigners, and the nationals can meet with nationals. And they have to be in the official Chinese church, which this is not. So the moment we walked in this room, there's like an instant bond of trust, because everyone in the room, if they were to turn us in, could get us ejected from the country. But if we, for some reason, were to turn one of them in, you know, they could lose their, well, they would probably almost certainly lose their job and potentially be jailed. It just depends on the particular local authorities, how they handle it, but it's always bad. It's not a good thing. So we were all taking a risk by being there, but what that did was create this instant bond and trust, and kind of cut through the fluff, if you will. Like, everyone was very serious. You were there because you're either seeking or you already know Jesus, but you're taking it seriously. No one's there like, you know, just kind of observing, or because they got drugged there by their, you know, sibling or parents or whatever. It just didn't really happen. You wouldn't bring your sibling in if you didn't trust that they weren't going to turn you in. And you know what I mean? Like, it was an interesting situation, but an amazing privilege to be a part of it. Anyway, so that was kind of just a few China photos. I actually want to move on to Thailand, because that's where we're at now. So while we're in China, we had a surgery for our son in Thailand. We had a training conference that we went to with our organization, which was the IMB at the time. And there's a lot of ministries in Thailand that exist to support missionaries that are in the surrounding closed countries. And so I think these ministries kept us on the field in China. So we wanted to be a part of it. So we're really just excited to move that direction, and there are a number of opportunities. And so as we landed in the airport, this is what you see. This is the Thailand airport. So that's what you'll see upon arrival. This guy's about, I don't know, 1.5 stories, maybe 2 stories tall.
Wow.
And yeah, so we came there for that reason. We wanted to be a part of supporting and encouraging missionaries, but while we're there, we realized we actually end up also being a part of new missionaries who come from South America, the States, Canada, New Zealand. They come to Thailand first, and it becomes like a launching point, and then they go into the closed countries from there. But it's often better to start here, and your organization will frequently have their headquarters set up in Thailand, because they're so friendly. The government's friendly, the people are friendly, the weather's friendly. It just really is a very open and pleasant place. And they do have religious freedom, though I think it's 95.5% or something of Thai people are Buddhist. So it is itself an unreached group. So they very much need the gospel. So that's, obviously, while we're there, that's our other goal, is to interact with everyone who comes our direction. So they have these really interesting, mythological stories, if you will, and they just, here they're like wrestling the serpent, but pulling it from one side to the other, and trying to win the competition. And they have the guy in the center is kind of like a demigod of some sort. They have like minor deities. So I'll get a little bit more into that in a little bit here. So one of the things that we did and wanted to do and were able to do for about 8 months was to work at a place called the Juniper Tree, and it's a missionary guest house. And its sole purpose is to support and encourage missionaries from the surrounding countries. And this is it. So they build their guest houses, I guess you'd call it, in the traditional Thai manner, which is to be up on posts or stilts. And it's all wood construction, and it's a little rustic, but it's comfortable. And they have maybe 12 or 14 of these. And then they have some other buildings as well. So I think they can house, up to, it's about 24 families total, actually. So it's pretty good, decent size. And when we arrived, we started to work with them. We started to lead a worship night. They had already had directors. And so what we did was kind of fill in the gaps of what they wished they could do but didn't have time. So we started to lead a worship night once a week, and we're starting to set up some other ideas, but unfortunately, when we got there was March of 2020, and that's when COVID started. So all the missionaries that were traveling to and from stopped, but a group of them got stuck at this location, and we were kind of in that group. And so we ended up, and every church in Chiang Mai closed, and there are a few Christian international churches, but they all had to shut down. But this place is private property, and technically the folks there were sort of living there. And so they were already together and sharing meals. So legally, they were allowed to continue meeting. So we ended up doing church service there as well. So twice a week, so we'd have a church service Sunday morning, a midweek worship service, and we just kind of helped with, help the directors with the operations in whatever areas they might need for about 8 months, until finally the missionaries would go back to their home country or wherever they would kind of disperse to, and they finally had to close their doors for about a year because there was no travel, which I'm sure you're aware of. Travel just kind of has shut down over a lot of the earth. So they're now back open, which is wonderful, and we've had a chance to go back and lead worship there a couple times, and we did a Christmas, I think I have a picture. This is the dining hall. So you can see that's, when it's full, they'll fill that place up. It's wonderful. This is some of the food they serve. I just thought you might get a kick out of it. Does anybody recognize this? No, it's not a sea creature. It's actually a fruit. It's called rambutan or rambutan, depends who you talk to. And these are halfway peeled. So they're surrounded by that kind of hairy, my kids call it the coronavirus fruit because it looks like a diagram of coronavirus, which I thought was kind of funny. So that's but these are half peeled. So when you take half of it off, then you see the fruit inside. That's what you eat. They're tasty. Anyway, so this is the church service, Christmas service that we're leading. My kids were up front doing some kind of special number, and my wife's playing the piano. Usually I play, but she was doing this one. Here I am sitting at the piano. We had a live harpist. I've never in my life been accompanied by a live harpist. That was pretty amazing.
Pretty cool.
Really neat. And then one of the things we like to do, we realized a need, our need while we were on the field in China, is there are holidays that occur in America that are just, they're not, there's no Easter in China. Like, it's not even a thing. They don't really celebrate China. You'll see, they don't really celebrate Christmas. You'll see a few decorations, but they don't, celebrate it. It's not a day off. It's just a work day and whatever. And so those times can get really lonely. And you really miss family, and you also miss the Christmas meal and the food and whatever. So one of the things that we've started to do is gather around us missionaries, maybe single folks who don't have families, or just other missionaries who maybe don't have anybody to celebrate with, and we host like a holiday meal. Generally, it's at our house in Thailand. This one happened to be at the juniper tree again, and this is Easter, so the kids are doing an egg hunt. And but again, it's just a way to, I guess, reduce the homesickness maybe, and to reconnect you with your home culture. It can be really important, actually. It's very difficult to be away. When you just wake up, it's Christmas morning, and it's just like a work day. And it's just kind of depressing somehow. It's just so anyway, that's one thing that we've done. It blesses us too to have people around us, but can get expensive. Turkey, for example, on Thanksgiving, and this is just for the Americans, of course, but there's a number of American missionaries. So we had a Thanksgiving at our house. Actually, a lady from New Zealand came to just to see what it was. She's like, "Oh, I've always heard about Thanksgiving. I want to be." So she came too. But a turkey in Thailand is imported. It's a butterball from the States, and it's 85 to 100 USD, depending on the weight. Insane. So we had chicken. That's nuts. But it is true. You try to locate these foods that you're used to, And they're costly. You know, I could feed my family for about $5 or $6 US. I can feed my family of 5 if we eat local Thai food. And that's including a delivery cost. We can have it delivered to our house. But if you try to eat Western food, the cost just goes up like exponentially. And then if you try to locate something like a turkey or you know, cranberries or something that you're trying to get for a holiday, then it's even more so. But we found it's worth putting some time and money into. We've been able to really bless some folks. So that's one aspect of a way to support and encourage missionaries. One more aspect. So once the juniper tree closed, obviously we had to look for other opportunities. And this came our way. A gentleman, you can just barely see him. Well, actually, there's 2 folks there who were stuck at the juniper tree. Well, he works with Frontier Ventures, and he was setting up what they call an Asian hub. It's basically an office, but with rooms where they can house new folks coming to the field. I think they can house maybe, I think they have 6 rooms, you know, so whatever, do the math, it's 20 to 25 people tops maybe. So this is their dining area, and they had a group lined up to come in a few months' time, and they had absolutely nothing. So they kind of gave us a budget, and Ruth and I went and spent some of their money. So we got them beds and sheets, we got, you know, a mirror for each room and a drying rack, and we got linens and towels, and we got, we actually in the end, my wife has kind of a gift for this stuff. She got them like a welcome basket. I might have a picture of that. Yeah. So she bought this, that's Northern Thai traditional woven bag. So they got to keep that, and then it's got some Thai snacks and a little welcome letter, and just, so when these young folks came, it was called Innovasia was the program, and they come over and basically are being exposed to Asian culture, and then specifically Thai, with the idea that everyone who comes, they are considering going into missions. So what they do is they go to different ministries. So there's a red light district ministry, working with the ladies, you know, coming out of that, or maybe working with the ones that are still in it. There's a number of ministries, you know, that just occur right there in that city. There's folks who are working with the Muslim, you know, like immigrants who have come there. There's folks working to reach the local Buddhist people. There's quite a few things, and they also got to tour some temples. So we went with them for a lot of things once they arrived, and just barely got it all done before they arrived. Some of those things are really difficult to find. They don't use sheets, top sheets in Thailand. They have a bottom sheet, and then there's like a super thick comforter. And it's 103 outside. So like any Westerner is like, you know, you like the comfort of having a blanket of some sort, but you don't want this crazy comforter. I don't know, but that's what they do. And so like we're like, no, we're gonna find a top sheet for these people. So we scoured the city for, I don't even know, it took multiple days until we finally found it. It didn't match. Top sheet was white, the bottom one was a different color, but we're like, it's fine, they'll be comfortable. So things like that. But we went with this group, and we got to tour a couple Thai temples. They're just open. The Buddhist monks live on the grounds, but they let you just come in, and they don't mind at all. There's a lot of tourists that come through, and so we got to walk through. The architecture in the building is just beautiful. I mean, it's amazing what they do, but it's simultaneously sad because while you're there, someone will kneel down barefoot and start praying. You know, and I'm just trying to look at the building, and I'm like, oh man, you know, it's just, but it, you know, keeps right in front of your mind while you're there and doing what you do. This one is actually real gold, not solid, it's plated gold, but that's just solid, plated gold on this whole structure. It's absolutely amazing. This is inside, and like I said, there's two guys kneeling there, offering up prayers, and I think they were burning incense too. You'll often see altars sitting around with, they have incense, but there'll be like apples on the altar, and they used to do blood sacrifice. So nowadays, I think they got outlawed, so they do red, like Fanta pop, and they open it and set it there and there's always a straw in it. And I actually haven't figured out why demigod need a straw to drink his Fanta? I have no idea how that works, but I'm still learning more about it. But it's very interesting. And here's the outside of one. This is just on the street. You can see the cars parked right there. So it's just right there. There's a sidewalk, and then boom, temple. And this is inside. This is, again, I don't know all the significance of it, but these bells are rung at certain times, and it's, ritualistic prayer, basically. This one is super interesting. This is a library. So this holds the Buddhist sacred writings, which, if you notice, so there's orange steps at the base, and then the steps are missing, right? And then they continue up from there. So you cannot go read the Buddhist sacred writings. They are locked away in this building. They're not accessible. I just thought that was interesting. Once a year, they actually roll out or drag out, I don't know, steps, and they complete this thing. And then the monks are allowed, it's like a ceremony, they can go in there, but it's like once a year. I just thought, what a contrast with, we have God's Word, and we are encouraged, right, to read it daily, to read it often, and also to, when you hear somebody proclaiming God's Word and preaching, we're actually told to compare what you're hearing with the Word and make sure it lines up, right? So I just thought the contrast between this, where it's like physically locked away, they're not encouraged to do that at all. What the monks say and teach is kind of, the final authority. And I don't know, I just was, it's an interesting dichotomy, I guess. By contrast, so things in Thailand tend to be kind of beautiful and ornate and whatever, but this is when we were living in China. So they also are Buddhist in China, a lot of folks, but it's a different flavor. It has more to do with ancestor worship. It's called animism is really what it's called, but it's mixed in with their Buddhism, and it's like fear-based. So the difference, I walk around noticing the difference constantly. This is the Chinese, like, fear-based, kind of angry, ugly, ghoulish looking fella here, and he's there to scare off evil spirits, and it's a very, if you don't placate those spirits, they will harass you and make you sick maybe, or make you fail your test exam, or whatever it is. And so it's just kind of a fear-based system. And the contrast with Thailand, it really is rather peaceful and beautiful by comparison. It's very interesting. So again, coming back to these verses that we read, the way you would approach each one, is going to be a bit different. You want to observe where they're at and the way they worship and what they believe, and you want to find an in, and you look for what piece of the gospel might they be a little bit receptive to. If I can interrupt myself, what time do I need to wrap up?
Usually by like 10 a.m.
By 10?
10 after.
10 after, okay, so about 10 more minutes? Okay, good. Where was I? I lost my train of thought now. Oh, I guess looking for an in. So I wanted to come back to the verses where he kind of says, while I was passing through and examining the objects of your worship, I found an altar with this inscription, to an unknown God. And then Paul launched right into saying that God was the creator God, right? And I felt like, I feel like that's real significant. The Buddhist ideology or theology, if you will, it really doesn't include the idea of a creator God, which is interesting. They have deities, but they're like minor deities. They're not immortal in their mind. They might live for thousands of years, but they can, die and be killed and whatever. And so they don't have this idea of an immortal God who, was the creator of all things. And so that is kind of an interesting into when you're talking with, especially in Thailand, they enjoy talking. They want to know what you believe. They're open to it. They generally don't care. They're not often very responsive, but they're willing to talk to you about it. So a good starting point is often to bring that up, that idea, and say, well, where do you think we all came from? And where do you think these demigods came from? They must have had a starting point. How did things get to where they're currently at now? What was the origin? What power was there that was able to create such intricate life and expansive universe? And that's a good starting point because they don't really have an answer. They would say it's unknown, and that gives us an opportunity to say, well, let me share with you something that I do know, and let me tell you about the Creator God who chose to bring you into existence and who loves you and pursuing you. And then obviously also, like these verses, have to bring that around then to there's a time of judgment and there is a salvation available to you. But anyway, I thought it's just very applicable, to what we're doing. Okay, yeah, so for these last 10 minutes, I actually want to shift gears before I run out of time and talk about our current, I guess you call it a program we're trying to set up. So we homeschool our 3 boys. It's been very difficult. We're in, southern China. There's not a lot of resources. They're all in 3 different grade levels, of course. We have to try to learn Chinese while being part of this underground church, while homeschooling 3 grade levels. It's just not easy, while getting used to the culture and doing everything else we have to do.
Right.
It's very difficult, and one thing that we've been hugely blessed, this young lady in the black shirt on the right, her name was Amanda, she's Brazilian. She came over and taught our boys for almost a whole year. It was actually 9 months, I think. And just wonderful. So she taught the younger 2. Our oldest is 15, he kind of does school on his own online. Yeah, I mean, he doesn't, not totally by himself, but he doesn't need a lot of interaction. So it really freed both myself and my wife up to be able to, because we worked full time with that Frontier Ventures in Asia, the hub that we were setting up. That was a, I don't know, 7-month project maybe. It was, but it took both of us. And we could do it because she was there. Such a blessing. And then after, one of the young ladies actually in the earlier photo from the Asian hub that we were setting up, she met Amanda and said, I want to do that too. So then when Amanda left, the other young lady, her name was Sarah, she actually came over just for about 4.5 months, and she taught our boys as well. So such a blessing, and it helped us kind of get onto our feet in Thailand. Really valuable. So my wife's going to take the homeschool back over now, but and I'm going to try to do full-time ministry, and she's going to do kind of mostly full-time, just schooling for now. But what we would like to do is bless other families with it. Families all around us were like, where did you get her? How do I do this? What is there a program for this? I'm like, no. There's not, but there should be. And so that's what we want to do. So our vision is to start kind of small, maybe just like 4 people. And it could be someone in their gap year, like younger folk, could be a retired age couple. It could be anyone in between, really. But someone who's interested in missions and wants to work on the field and also be of immediate use to a family, because they're going to plug right in, right? And you'd be teaching homeschool. But you also are getting exposed to the mission field and exploring whether maybe you want to do it long term. So our thought was, if the first group was maybe kind of small, but if we had four young folks maybe come over, they could room together, and we would plug them into 4 different families. And that's kind of, and then my role would be to get their visa set up, get their travel arranged, and then arrange the expectations of the receiving family with the expectations of this young person coming over, and then having meetings to make sure that things are progressing well. And I believe right now kind of in talks with an organization called Crossworld, and I think they're going to do, I guess what you call the back-end logistics. They're going to do the health insurance for the young folks coming over, medical evac if they ever had to, and they're gonna do, so they'll be like a short-term member of that organization, that way it's not all on my shoulders. Even legally, that just makes sense, it's a good idea. Anyway, so I wanted to share that because we are looking for folks who'd be interested. So if you know of anyone in the gap year that might want to come over, somebody who maybe is called to the field, there's value in taking a trip to the field. But it's also common that someone takes like an 8-day trip, right, to like Africa or Asia, and they get all excited about it, and they come back and raise support and go to the field and find out, my goodness, this place is dirty, and it doesn't smell right, and I don't like this food anymore. And after about 9 months, these people are kind of annoying, and I don't know if I think I want to be here anymore. And it's difficult, and you get homesick, and you get overwhelmed, and the language bothers you, and it's just, there's a lot of things that set in around like 9 to 12 months, somewhere in that range, maybe a year and a half, somewhere around there. And so this is an opportunity not only for the receiving family who is going to have a homeschool helper help them out, but also for the young person or retirement age person who maybe is coming over to think about staying on the field longer term. You get a very real taste of can I actually live in Asia? Do I want to do this long term? And after a year, you really have a good handle on that. So it's kind of a twofold vision. And like I said, Thailand tends to be a launching point where you arrive there and go elsewhere, and it's a retreat point. And this does both, which I love. So maybe a family, some families, they'll come into Thailand, and maybe we can connect them, and they teach for a time while they're there, and then so it serves both purposes, and it's something we're really excited about. And we just thought of a name. We're going to call it Inspire, and it's going to be a homeschool internship program. So that is. I'd just like to ask you to pray about if you know of anyone who'd be interested, or if you yourself are interested. Please connect us. We are kind of currently, recruiting. We'd like to get started for the next year's school year, because it takes a number of months. You have to raise some support. It's fairly inexpensive to come to Thailand short term. It's fairly expensive to stay there long term. But if you're just there for 12 months, it's not absurdly expensive. Oh, here she is. The young lady in the dark shirt on the left now was the second young lady who came with our family. And I'm about out of time, so these are just real quick. This is me with a group of kids, and my boys are out there just playing football, soccer, and with the local kids in our community. And we found out afterwards, like, oh no, Thai people don't mingle with their neighbors. That's not really a thing. I'm like, well, nobody told us, so we're doing it. But because the Thai folks, they tend to, are you familiar with the idea of saving face and losing face? Everyone has a wall around their property, and if you go and invite your neighbor to do something or come to your house, and they say no for some reason, someone's losing face. Either they're offending you and you're losing face, or because it depends in your social rank too, who's the higher and the lower and whatever, but it gets complex. But by saying no, you yourself can lose face, and it becomes this awkward thing. So people just stay in their little boxes. So we're excited to be able to expand out about it. Oh, I thought this was a neat contrast. This is me playing football, soccer, in China. We're playing on a cement ramp that goes down, and that's where the garbage truck comes in. That's all that ramp is for. So it's just we lived in a cement jungle in China, and here we get to live in an actual jungle, and it's just so green and nice compared. It's just, to me, every day I'm hit with the contrast. So this is I think it was Thanksgiving actually. This was a gathering we got to have and host, and have a whole group of folks over and bless them, and a whole room full of kids we had that day. It was a little chaotic, but a lot of fun. And I'm going to wrap up right there since I'm fresh out of time. So anyway, thank you for having me. Thank you that you have supported us through the years, and we hope to continue where we're at and move forwards, and we'll send updates, and just such a blessing to be back. We are raising support, so if you as an individual, feel like you're shifting around charitable giving and you would want to support us, we have a site, lanceandruth.com. So you just go there and it talks about how to do that. And that's what keeps us going, keeps us on the field. So thank you so much for your prayers, for your supports, and for listening to me this morning. Thank you. Did you want to wrap up with closing remarks?
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Mike will close this with a song.
Okay, wonderful.